Check, 1, 2. 1, 2.
Kia ora koutou. Welcome to our final session for this week of WOW before we get on to the festival stuff tomorrow and the Sustainable Communities tours. My name is Monique Kelly. I am the GM as well as one of the trustees of WOW Aotearoa. And I found this week to be absolutely mind-blowing. I think my cup is full in so many ways, and a lot of it has to do with our community, because I think that many of the experts and the knowledge and the stories that have been told are stories about our community and how we're actually really leaning into making this world a better future. And I'd also like to acknowledge those who have come from outside the district. We created Crucible here for change during 1 week where we can all come together, and there's a little bit of magic that happens. So a huge thank you to everybody for being involved. Our role at WOW Aotearoa is really to inspire, educate and enable us to go towards that thriving future that we know that we can create and we are creating. And I think that the one thing that it holds us together and is a theme throughout everything that we do is we do everything in partnership. And I'm really excited to bring into this room tonight, into this space, some incredible speakers doing incredible things in their realm, because it's going to take all of us in all sorts of different sectors. We all do our bit, and that creates the whole. Just before I do get into introducing the different speakers that we're going to have tonight, housekeeping. So if at all there is a fire, you hear the alarm, we've got the emergency exits here and at the back. Toilets are out the back as well in the foyer. In between this one and the 2050 talk, we're going to be having some soup, I think, and food over here, so please stay on and help yourself for that. There's also wine and beer and other drinks available if you would like them. In case of an earthquake, drop and hold, and then we'll wait and see if it rolls over. Now that I've said it, it won't happen. Now I'm going to introduce tonight's talk. So as I said, local heroes from the South Island. We're really lucky to have carbon neutral Dipton up here from Southland. I'm really excited about hearing about them. A few apologies, just because life happens sometimes, and some of our speakers for tonight weren't able to make it for various reasons. But the 4 speakers that we are going to listen to, we've got Donald Boyer from Chorova, Ngāi Tahu Tourism, so thank you, Donald, for coming. He's going to be up first. We've got Carly Green, who's going to be talking about the state of the catchment, Ben Youngman from Waiwanaka, and we've also got Claire Officer and Lyndon, who are going to come up, and they're going to tag team to do their talk about the carbon neutral Dipton. Afterwards, we're going to bring them all up on stage, and we get to ply them with our questions. So during the conversation that you've got going on, jump onto Menti, and if you go to menti.com on your phone and just enter 67115837. Can everybody see that, or would some like me to say it out again if you need me to? Maybe I just say it one more time. So menti.com, enter that, and then 67115837. If you could, with your phone, keep it alive, but silent, if you could. And without further ado, I am going to ask Donald to come up, and we'll give him a big round of applause.
Kia ora koutou, my name's Donald. I'm the business manager of Shotover Jet in Queenstown. I've worked at Shotover for 9 years and 2 days exactly. I started out, I was actually a groundsperson, so I started out mowing the lawns and looking after the gardens, and then trained to drive the boats, and have hung around long enough that I've now ended up managing the whole business. I'm also super fortunate. As part of my role, I've led the electrification of our jet boat project, which is sort of still in its early stages, and it's mostly what I'm going to talk about tonight. Shotover Jet's owned by Ngāi Tahu Tourism. We have 10 tourism businesses throughout the country, and Ngāi Tahu Holdings has an 88-point action plan to address climate change called Te Kaungara Paparangi. It's a sort of a multi-generational approach to climate change, and the piece I'm going to focus on tonight is about our operations within tourism will emit no greenhouse gases, and that's sort of touching on the electric jet boat. So I'd introduce that. I'll just have a short video that we took when we launched the prototype about a year and a half ago, and then I'll sort of talk about the journey. There's plenty of electric boats being built and trialled at the moment, but nothing quite with this amount of power and this amount of performance.
We made a really bulky call that we would be carbon neutral, and really had to start our journey on how are we going to do that, which is where the thought pattern came on, how can we do our jet boats different.
To get it to this point today, it's climbing Everest. I mean, the excitement in the air is just electrifying.
The batteries do it easy. The motors do it reasonably easy too. But of course, seeing it in real life happening and monitoring the currents, the voltages, the motor output is just crazy, you know, it's very cool.
Essentially, it looks like we ticked a big green box. We were dealing with cutting edge technology, but also things that had never been done before.
I think that there'll be a lot more big learnings and a lot more big challenges that we are committed to do.
Like, I mean, having a emission-free boat, how cool is that?
So I think the best way to talk about the jet boat electrification journey is sort of in a linear fashion. And the boat that you see there is what we call the prototype, and that project was started in late 2018. We were looking at what we needed to do to reduce our impact on the environment and reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, and pretty quickly it was obvious that our consumption of fossil fuels was a really big issue that we needed to tackle. And within, you know, we have light vehicles and buses and shuttle buses, but the largest portion was being used by our jet boat operations. So Ngāi Tahu Tourism across the 3 jet boat operations owned 26 jet boats, so it was the obvious thing to tackle first. The prototype that you see there is, or was, an internal combustion engine jet boat. You know, twin V8. It had done about 20,000 trips on the Shotover. It was due to be decommissioned, but prior to that, we actually pulled it out of service, completely stripped it out to retrofit it to be electric. And the reason we needed to do that was, and like you kind of heard in the video, there's quite a number of electric boats and electric vessels around the world now. And you know, we've seen the Candela, for example, here in Wanaka. But there was nothing that was currently being built or being designed that had the performance that we needed, and the sense of speed and acceleration. Certainly nothing that could take you know, up to 17 passengers and do 360-degree spins. So to get some data that we needed to design a commercial electric jet boat for the future, we needed to build a prototype. So that started late 2018. A lot of design went on early in mid-2019, and we sent the hull to Dunedin, where it was fitted out by some electrical engineers there. Our team had a lot to do with the fit out as well. It ended up being the same weight, so that boat there with the driver and 1 tech on board and all its batteries and electric motors ended up being the same weight as a fully loaded internal combustion engine Shotover jet boat, which is really blimmin' heavy, but it was actually really good because when we were doing the full runs of the river, it gave us very accurate data, which was exactly what we needed. So the cells and the batteries in the boat are approximately 120 kilowatt hours, which is, in reasonably round figures, the average Kiwi household would use that amount of energy in approximately 6 days. And another way to put it, the amount of energy that boat would consume in 60 minutes is the same amount of energy, or very similar amount of energy, that a Tesla Model S consumes to use its full range of about 800 Ks, and that's also the crazy one that can go 0 to 60 in about 2 seconds. So jet boats are not, water jet units are not the most efficient way of pushing a boat along, so we've got a really big challenge ahead of us with packing enough energy into a jet boat for our purposes. But as we've discovered as we've gone along in the prototype journey and the design, it is really quite possible. It just needs some pretty clever thinking by people that are much smarter than me. One of the big challenges we come up against is weight. So an empty internal combustion engine Shotover jet boat weighs around about 2.5 tonne, and one of the things that I set out right from the early days of this project was an electric jet boat must perform a Shotover jet trip the same or better than a petrol-powered jet boat. So that meant we could not exceed a bunch of limits, you know, length, width, but also weight, and weight's been the massive challenge. So we're moving away from aluminium boats to mostly composite carbon fibre movable ballast, looking at where we can get additional flotation out of the hull, and a lot of other clever things with that the designers are working on. So we launched that in 2022, last year, April. First day was on the lake up at Glenorchy. It had been a pretty massive journey. The project had been hibernated through COVID as well. Pretty nervous for that day, but it got out on the lake, and the thing just got up and took off, and we were in a petrol boat struggling to catch up with it. So it was a pretty exciting day, pretty rewarding, but it was just the very first step in a very long journey to convert our fleet to electric. So where we're at now, currently we've finished that portion of the project. That boat still exists, but it's just a display piece now. And we are working on the design of the commercial boat, but also the infrastructure. We've got a challenge to build the jet boats themselves, but the infrastructure that we need into the Shotover jet site is pretty significant. We're looking at needing about 1 megawatt of feed into the site, which is not a small amount of power, but it's with some upgrades to the local grid and a lot of talking with Aurora, it's quite possible. And also the challenges of, we charge our electric cars, there's fixed points all around the country, and that's really great. And we will charge our electric jet boats in the boat shed, but we also need to charge them on the river in between trips. And yeah, water and electricity don't go well together, but with some clever, safe design, it's pretty easily overcome. But the nature of our operation, we operate on the river. It floods pretty well 4 or 5 times a year. So where the river meets the river bank, it can move by up to 50 metres. So the entire charge system needs to be removable, which is not a common thing to need to do. So we're looking at a bunch of options that, there might be a gantry that comes from the other side of the river, for example. But we really want to do it in a manner that everything that we put down at the riverside for a day's operation, we can remove at the end of the day, except for the jetty, it's like we weren't there. So some pretty exciting things, pretty exciting project to be a part of. Super challenging. The hill doesn't feel like it's getting any steeper as we go along with design and learn more. It just seems to get blimmin' further, higher. But we'll get there. Don't know when the first boat's going to be launched. We were hoping for early next year, but it's probably going to be delayed until the end of next year, and that's just due to the fact that, like with a lot of projects, the more you learn, the more you realise that you need to actually learn and design more to get to the next step. And also there's been pieces where we've made more rapid progress than we anticipated, but we'll get there. But I think super fortunate that our business is backed by Ngāi Tahu iwi, and they have mandated us to convert our boats to electric. Like they recognise, and we also recognise, we cannot continue to burn fossil fuels, fully backing us to make this happen, and it will. And I think we're in a really fortunate situation that it's one thing to tell people to change, but it's another thing, a really powerful thing to show people, show the world what is possible, and that's kind of what we're trying to do.
Yeah, well, kia ora everybody. My name's Ben Youngman. I'm the Science and Research Lead at Waiwanaka. I've been fortunate enough to have the opportunity to come and speak here on behalf of the Waiwanaka team and the rest of the steering group around one of the key projects that we've been undertaking over these last 18 months. I've prepared a few cue cards because I'm quite prone to waffling, but it's less prescriptive from what I hear, so please excuse me. So at Waiwanaka, we're all about accelerating action for our fresh water. So in 2016, there were a couple of trusts around the region that that merged to respond to some of the environmental challenges that the catchment was experiencing. So on the right there is is what we define our catchment to be. So this is the Upper Clutha. We have quite a unique catchment because we're surrounded by quite a few mountains and different major tributaries coming in, but also some other unassuming tributaries as well. And obviously with the mighty Clutha River cutting the South Island in half, so we've got quite a unique environment here. At Waiwanaka, we consider the rural, the urban, and the visitors to be our kind of three central stakeholders around the place. So our vision at Waiwanaka is, our mission is, by working together we empower communities to understand their water, their environment, and their impact. What comes with that is projects that span across land management, urban development, ecosystem actions, and behaviour change. Back in 2019, there was a big community project led by Waiwanaka where we constructed a community catchment plan. And what that was doing was looking at what the community values and how we can actually tackle some of these environmental challenges together. So what spanned out of that was 60 actions spanning across those different categories that I spoke to just before. So what we do at Waiwanaka, we have three central pillars that sort of focus around this idea of community action for our fresh water. So under the research pillar, we look to commission research. We look to facilitate research, bring those expert opinions and expert research to the community and to the people that actually need to know about it. And we also have citizen science programs as well, getting that community engagement. We realise that some of the environmental challenges that we have can't be addressed by one individual organisation. It's the people that are actually in the community that are going to contribute to a lot of these challenges as well. We have advocacy, and advocacy is, might get your heckles up a little bit for some people, but at Waiwanaka we are mature advocates. We sit at the table with people and councils in particular and other environmental organisations and really discuss ways forward and how we can collaborate with community, with other organisations and really tackle these challenges together. And our third pillar is education, so that's really bringing this science, this policy and making it digestible for the wider community, because at the end of the day the community are the ones that are going to make a lot of these changes. So what I'm going to talk to you today is the Upper Clutha Catchment Native Biodiversity Strategy. So this was a project that it really sets the framework for what the future of biodiversity will look like in this region, and we really want to understand what biodiversity means to the community and help advance those values forth for the future. So this strategy sits within, it's informed by a bunch of other strategies. We have the National Biodiversity Strategy, we have the Regional Council's Biodiversity Strategy, and then we also have the District Council's Climate and Biodiversity Plan. And so our Upper Clutha Biodiversity Plan really sits alongside that Queenstown District Lakes strategy, where we're looking to stand on each other's shoulders and really inform things going forth. But what we can see here and what's been tried to explain is the really holistic nature of, it's a step-down process. We're making sure that whilst we're looking after our region, we're actually hitting a lot of the goals and values that we as a nation also adhere to. So with this strategy, the focus is on non-public conservation land. So I'm sure you're aware there's a lot of public conservation land around this region. So this strategy really focuses on those areas that have some incredible and unique biodiversity values, but aren't necessarily within that public kind of custodianship. So the purpose of the strategy it's really to break down silos. It's to help coordinate and prioritise efforts that many organisations and individuals are doing around this region. We all know that we're doing great work, but we're not so great at talking to each other and sharing information. So part of the strategy is really trying to break down those barriers and get people actually talking to each other. We want to connect residents and visitors to our unique biodiversity, so that's all about awareness. We live in such a naturally beautiful part of the country, but sometimes you just need to, you don't know what you don't know, right? So it's about bringing some of those values forward to the table so that we can understand some of the challenges that the environment in this region is actually facing. As well, we'd like the strategy to help assist other organisations involved in conservation with funding. So how this strategy has been positioned, as I indicated in the slide before, around it's been referenced throughout these different and wider strategies at the national level and within the regional level as well. So this strategy will really help other industries, other organisations within the industry really help address some of those challenges and some of those directions that those strategies actually are looking towards to try and achieve. So what does success look like for this strategy? So people, we want to get people to understand what biodiversity means. We want to understand what biodiversity values the community has within this region. Biodiversity in particular, there's an incredibly amount of niche ecosystems around here. It's very, very unique, and there's a lot of genetic and very unique genetic diversity here. So we want to prioritise some of those really threatened ecosystems and make sure that we're looking after some of those values the best we can. And finally, practice. So we want practices to be sympathetic towards land management. So making sure that our human behaviour isn't having the same impacts or negative impacts on the land. And we also would quite like to prioritise native Indigenous biodiversity within this region as well. So what we did is we got a very strong and passionate collection of individuals from the region representing all forms of environmental science and ecology to really sit down and get in a room and start thinking about what we would like biodiversity to look like in the future. And as you can see, there was quite a diverse range of people there, ranging from restoration and terrestrial ecology all the way through to lake ecosystems and pest control. So what came out of this steering group, and it was an iterative process, we formed a document that had 17 outcomes, and then we took that document to the wider community, and we had a workshop back in June where we said, hey, here's what we've come up with. We want you to go through it with a fine-tooth comb and tell us what's wrong with it, tell us what's good with it, and what you think you can do to help carry this strategy forward. So the workshop was over 4 hours. It involved 30 different environmental organisations and 50 individuals across all of those organisations in this very room. And it was quite an intense process, to be honest. I went through all of the butcher's paper. So what came out of that was a significant amount of feedback from workshop attendees. I'm sure some of you were probably part of that workshop. And a tremendous amount of feedback, and we thank everyone for it. David and myself went through really trying to tighten the strategy up and look at how we can make it digestible for the wider community, because at the end of the day, this document has been community led from the onset. So we really want some community direction, community driven going forward. So David and myself reduced the 17 outcomes down to 6 goals. There was about 42 bits of butcher's paper. And so there were 3 categories that these goals kind of fall under, and I'm just going to talk to these categories a little bit now. Community engagement was one of those categories around some of these goals. So that's really trying to understand get the community to understand what biodiversity values we have in this region, what the impacts of climate change will bring to this region, and we have fairly strong metrics to gauge that through QLDC, quality of life surveys and things like that as well. The second category was coordinated biodiversity management and evidence-based biodiversity management. So really what that's doing is, again, breaking down some of those silos that currently exist within the industry, and really bringing in some synchronized efforts to those who are doing great work, just making sure that we're talking to each other and ensuring that we're not doing the same work as each other. And the third category was around ecosystem preservation and restoration. So really this was, again, trying to look at those unique biodiversity values that we have within this region and identifying some of those key threatened species or ecosystems and focusing attention and resources towards those, and really just starting there from the get-go. Again, this strategy and this document has had community involvement on the onset and throughout, and so that's what really gives this strategy power and teeth, is that it's had community involvement throughout the whole process. So going forth, socialisation is very critical as some of these pressures come from central government around natural policy statements for Indigenous biodiversity and freshwater management. There are some pretty challenging regulations that as a nation we're going to have to address, and the only way that we can actually do that is by understanding it as a community and actually binding together and addressing some of these challenges together. So part of this document, as I said, can be used for funding. So whilst these national policy statements are coming down and being implemented at a regional level and at a national level, the strategy has really been informed by a lot of the direction of these policy statements go forth. So the strategy can be used for other community groups to look for funding. So the way in which that it's been tailored and the way in which it's been structured is a very useful tool for other community groups that are involved in conservation and other environmental work. They can use this strategy to inform some other funding applications for them as well. So advocacy, that was one of our pillars at Y. So going forth, this strategy does need some advocacy. It needs advocacy within council and industry. Again, it's breaking down those silos. It's bringing to the table, hey, you're doing this work over here, we're doing this work over here. Let's pull together. Let's pull our labour, pull our resources, and actually tackle these challenges together. So next steps for the strategy. So we'll continue to socialise the strategy with the wider community, not just the conservation community, but with council and with other industry body representatives as well. We'll continue to work with groups and help with funding and coordination of these of some of these initiatives and actions that we have that fall out of this great work. And we also want to ensure that there's a mechanism going forth to help this great work go and continue on. So I guess pulling it to the international level now and to just, I guess, position this strategy. At the end of 2022, there was a UN biodiversity forum in Montreal, Canada, where there was 196 countries agreed to tackle the challenge of biodiversity together. New Zealand was one of those 196 countries. And so in response to that, and in response to some of these international obligations, the central government looked to implement some of these national policy statements to help them achieve some of their wider obligations to these international forums. They don't recognise, or they do recognise that its funding is quite challenging. So I'm sure some of you are aware that the government is asking for discussion around what a biodiversity credit framework might look like within New Zealand, similarly to how an emissions trading scheme works in New Zealand at the moment. So I'll leave you with us at Waiwanaka. Our vision is to have healthy ecosystems and community wellbeing for future generations. And our last slide here, this will take you, if you scan this QR code, this will take you to our website that will give you a link to our biodiversity strategy in its entirety. And it'll also take you to some of our other community projects as well. Thank you for your time.
Kia ora. You can't change what you can't measure, and it's a great privilege for me tonight to stand here and give you a bit more of an idea about some work that Wanaka is doing in the community as well. My name's Carly Green, and I'm presenting some fantastic work that our team at EAS have been doing in collaboration with Y and guided by Lincoln University. So aligned with Y's goals, as we heard from Ben just now, they have a whole of community, whole of basin approach to enduring outcomes in setting out, discovering who we, setting out to discover who we could collaborate with, to identify existing data sources that can communicate the health of our catchment at the Upper Clutha Basin level. One of the challenges that we have is when we're communicating what's happening in our catchment, the data isn't presented specifically to the catchment. And so we wanted to make sure that we could present the temporal and spatial scale appropriate for the catchment to make meaningful interpretations and then also take directed action. So the concept was to look at knowledge into action in the context of Te Tau. Sorry, it's been a long week. So we were wanting to make a collective aim was to acknowledge the interconnectedness of the various environmental and social factors and how they collectively contribute to the well-being of our overall ecosystem and make reliant communities who interact within it. Our work aligned with this concept of Te Tau and the deep relationship of respect and reciprocity with the natural world. And so the health of the climate, land, water, and the people living within that space becomes really important. And that's when nature thrives and it positively impacts our families and communities and our businesses. So we were trying to generate that information to support the community in this space. The components of this healthy catchment are the climate, the soil, the land and the water, and the living systems which are interconnected but also independent. And so our monitoring system that we're building is to try and portray this interconnectedness and the independence of each of these elements as well. With this interaction in this complex space, it helps to identify the overall health of our catchment, although its complexity means that as we present this information, it's not as simple as is it good or is it bad. So we partnered with a number of different community groups as well as experts in this area in our community, within the catchment, to come up with some indicators that could help us as a collective assess the health and report the health of our catchment. And the team came up with a not so short list. So in fact, the group met a few times and we ended up with about 25 indicators identified that come from a place of community sense of responsibility and to revitalise Te Tau. It was quite useful, the engagement, because it really helped us to broadly consider the information that's necessary to make meaningful insights for the key community groups. But it was also quite challenging because most of these indicators we actually didn't have any data for. So it became very apparent that we weren't going to be able to address the data gaps for all of these indicators within the time frame we had. So we still wanted to make a meaningful contribution around the catchment health statement. So what we did was we set about demonstrating with a subset of indicators what the possibilities are when you have existing data that can be presented and available at the right scale. So in this context, we selected 6 key indicators that could provide a sort of a snapshot of the state of the catchment health. These indicators had data sets that were relevant at our catchment level or could be effectively and meaningfully, most importantly, scaled to make some sort of statement. It was also noted that some of these data sets do have some limitations in that it may not be a fully representative of the current state. So I think just to take it in the context that we're working in the phase of a pilot of a catchment health monitoring system, which is where we've arrived at today. So here's some results. There wouldn't be an engineer's slide deck unless it had some pie graphs and some stats. So here we go. I'm just going to present 3 of the key indicators that we found because of time limitations, but some of the meaningful insights we did find around the land use and land use change space in our catchment is that we took a nationally relevant data set called LUCAS, and we deduced that the areas of settlement in our catchment have increased by about 60% over the last 30 years. And so most of this land use change has come at the expense of productive food-growing land. And over the same time frame, we've had an increase in our population of around 4-fold. Our catchment health monitoring plan here is trying to link not just a land use change indicator, but have an informed conversation around how that's having an influence on social wellbeing, water quality, and greenhouse gas emissions. And so the catchment remains predominantly productive agricultural lands, as you can see here, which links to greenhouse gas metrics, which we'll come to in a minute. The population increase, of course, also links to social wellbeing, which we'll also touch on in a second. So moving to greenhouse gas emissions, unlike the national profile for greenhouse gas emissions, emissions in our basin have been increasing over the last 3 years. So in New Zealand as a whole, our emissions have stabilised and in some cases slightly reduced, but here we're still slightly increasing. And linked to social wellbeing, around 80% of those respondents to the QLDC survey are quite concerned about this as an issue. So they're either concerned or very concerned. The main emission sources, as I mentioned, we have predominantly agricultural land in our catchment, so of course this remains quite the largest proportion of our emissions profile in this area, followed by transport, which is aligned with the national profile as well. We do have, the green is the sequestration in vegetation in the region, so we do have quite a lot of that as well, predominantly because of that, the land use within the catchment. Having said that, we have lost around 0.2% of our natural forest over that same time frame. Moving to invasive species, and there's so much work going on in our catchment around controlling invasive species, and it's great to see some progress in this area being made, particularly in our catchment. So this is local data taken from Trap NZ, and it shows the growth of engagement in trapping in our region over the last 3 years, and the resulting increase in traps, along with the number of pests caught. This also continues to increase with trap numbers, so that indicates that pest presence still remains an issue. I was asked what were the main species caught earlier today, and so the main species caught from the data from Trap NZ, mainly rats and possums made up 50% of the total pests caught. And finally, just to share a little bit around social wellbeing, and this is from the QIDC survey at our catchment level data. I just want to note here that it is limited because of the responses to this survey, but nonetheless makes some indication of how people are feeling in our area. So we overall scored a C, and that's reflective of a number of different aspects of our social wellbeing, and some of those things are improving or have made no change from the previous from the previous survey. So around 36% of the respondents indicate that they had sufficient levels of disposable income, indicate they had sufficient levels of disposable income after meeting all their basic needs. So that means around 60% of our community don't feel that way. And that has knock-on effects, of course, to their interaction with the other aspects or indicators of the catchment health. I think if we've just finished the technical work on this monitoring system, and we're really excited about the conversations we've been having about the knowledge that we now have at our catchment level. The report is available on the Y website with the QR code on the far left, and there's a project summary that gives you some more detail about the indicators that we've included and their interaction between each other. We want to continue to develop the report each year if possible and link the data to actions happening across the wide range of groups that are involved in this region, influencing the outcomes of the catchment health. And we want to be able to expand it, obviously, to the other 25 indicators. But however, that will also involve data collection, which is quite exciting and links also to Y's other pillars and priorities, as Ben mentioned. And I guess I'd really like to move forward with ensuring that we have data at the right scale so we can actually provide the knowledge we need to make positive actions. And the phase 2 of the program is to make this all available in a more user-friendly, less, more attractive online platform so that we can connect with both the community that's here and our visitors to understand the impact we're having and how we're feeling around the catchment health within the Upper Clutha Basin. Thank you.
Thank you. That's great, thanks. Evening, everyone. Thank you to Monique for inviting us here tonight to speak. I'm Claire Officer, and I'm a dairy farmer from Central Southland, part of the Greater Dipton Catchment Group.
Yeah, hi. I'm Lyndon Preble. I'm a sheep and beef farmer from Dipton.
So we're here to tell you a little bit about our story as a catchment group and then to focus on our project, which we call Carbon Neutral Dipton. But we've actually started with quite a bit about the catchment group because we felt that that was an important part of how we got the community involved with the project and how we've achieved the collective action that we have. The catchment group was formed back in 2019, and we're lucky to be supported in Southland by Thriving Southland. Thriving Southland received money from MPI from the Change and Innovation Fund, and that has allowed them to support catchment groups in the district. So there's now 35 catchment groups across Southland and Thriving Southland employ 5 catchment coordinators to help activities across these groups, but it's largely driven from the ground up, so it's farmers coming up with ideas, and Thriving are able to support that and fund some of the projects that have been done.
So our first step, once we set the group up, was to hold a community consultation evening. So we invited our community along, and basically we talked a little bit about what catchment groups are and what they're doing for the ones that were already operating in Southland. And then we asked them, or had a discussion about, okay, as a community, what could we do? What do we want to look at? What do we want to learn about? The result of that was also that we came up with a vision, which was that Dipton is a sustainable, connected and thriving community. And that's helped to sort of keep us focused on where we're heading.
As part of that, we've sort of developed some things we've done throughout the years. One of those, which has been really successful, is a spring wellbeing event that we've held. So we go through a busy calving and lambing period for farmers through September, October, and then each year we've held a wellbeing event just to get people together, get them off farm, give them the opportunity to get out basically and talk, but also it helps ideas come together from this. So we've had a local speaker, Bailey Unahay, and then also the YOLO farmer, who were both really inspiring talks, and we've just got our next one coming up next month.
Yep. With all our events, the connectedness part of it was really important. So we have always tried to have a lunch or afternoon tea, have a bar available, whatever, to try and allow people to have that time to connect after or during the event. So one of our first field days we ran was, we called it Know Your Issues, and that was really looking at the water quality issues for dairy farming and sheep and beef farming. And they are different on the different types of farm and the different type of land. And so a lot of learning. And it was really going back to basics, because a lot of the stuff is pretty new to farmers. You know, we do a lot of talking about production and how to make things go faster on farm, but this was stuff that farmers hadn't had much understanding of. So we had to spend quite a bit of time making sure everybody understood the basics. We also tried with our field days to make sure they were as short and succinct as possible. Farmers, like everybody else who runs a business, are pretty busy people, and we didn't want to be wasting their time. So I think that was an important aspect.
We've also, in that process, tried to call on experts to guide us through the journey, but also often the answers that are in the room. So by talking to our fellow farmers, we can learn a lot. This was an amazing field day at a property just south of Dipton with the Day family, and they have been really ahead of their time in terms of the planting they have done in terms of fencing off areas to protect waterways and also to increase biodiversity. So it was a really great field day just to learn from other people of where you could start and how the journey might look. Heaps of great lessons for us from that, including, you know, things about controlling weeds when you're trying to do natives and things, that eventually you do get to the stage where the natives are big enough to drown out the gorse and things, but really practical tips for people to take away and use in their own businesses.
Yeah, and as Claire said, we sort of, once we'd covered the water quality issues, we did move on to more onto biodiversity, and so part of the upskilling of ourselves in that area was we did a seed collection day at one of our farmers who has a large native bush block that's in a QE2 trust. And then we also spent some time up at the Lumsden Community Nursery learning about how to propagate and grow seedlings, native seedlings.
We've also held a variety of other sort of events. We had a really great recycling workshop, which again called on the knowledge in the room, and we brainstormed better ways to do things with our waste across all things from bale wrap to just your general household waste, which was a really great interactive evening. We've also joined as part of the community to do rubbish collection and things like that, and also held a drought shout that was a couple of years ago when, you know, things were really dry in Southland and farmers were struggling. Again, just that social connection is really important and where ideas come from a lot of the time.
And we also made use of local expertise. Environment Southland ran a couple of their water scientists ran a program on teaching us how to use SMAC kits to assess water quality, and also used beef and lamb workshops for doing farm environment plans and for the what they call Know Your Number, which is around carbon accounting.
So after lots of little field days and lots of smaller projects that had sort of grown the momentum of the group, we sort of decided we wanted to do something a bit bigger. Some of the other groups around us had been doing some really big projects, and I suppose we had a bit of FOMO, and we wanted to keep up with them. So we became brave, I suppose, and tackled quite a big one. Obviously, as you'll know, for us in ag, there's been a lot of talk about whether we're going to join the ETS, how that's going to look, and what the impacts of that might have. So we sort of asked ourselves the question, well, what can we do to reduce our number? We've all been asked to know our number by the likes of Fonterra, Alliance and that, but then what do you do once you know it? How do you start to reduce it? So we came up with a project which was really about greenhouse gas sequestration journey, but it didn't sound that great. So Carbon Neutral Dipton was our sort of aspirational title we came up with to support that project.
Yeah, so the project was really specifically looking at methane on farm as opposed to carbon dioxide or nitrous oxide. So we were really lucky to get three sheep and beef farmers, I'll talk about the sheep and beef farmers, who opened their farms up for analysis. We employed a couple of consultants. They used modelling programs, one called Overseer and one called FarmMax. The two different programs, Overseer gives us a model of all the emissions that are happening on farm, as opposed to FarmMax, which is more of an economic model, because we needed to be able to put a number on both our emissions and what the financial implications were. So, yeah, and so in this process we looked at a whole lot of mitigations, and those mitigations were modelled through the farms through both those two programs.
So alongside the sheep and beef farmers, there were also two dairy farmers involved, of which I was one, and Charlene and Chris were the other, which is Monique's cousin. So it was really great opportunity to be able to actually crunch our numbers like this and see what options came out. But as part of this, we really wanted to engage the whole community on the journey. We didn't want it just to be about the 5 project farmers. So we made the education side of things really important, and we started a Facebook page, shared the journey of where we were going with them, and also invited other farmers to join in alongside us.
Yeah, so I think one of the really cool things about the project that made it quite successful was what was termed buddy groups. So just to explain that, so each of the farmers, the 5 farmers involved in the project, invited 4 or 5 or 6 of their neighbours or friends along who had similar types of farms. And the idea was that those farming people would understand the project farmer's farm, have an idea of how the system worked that was currently being used, and then would use brainstorming and discussion to try and come up with some ideas of different mitigations that could be looked at. So I think we finished up with about 5 mitigations on each farm, which were different on each farm. So overall, I think probably about 25 different mitigations were looked at. Sorry, Mike.
And again, we called on the experts. As Lyndon's already mentioned, we used 2 farm consultants. So one of them was an agricultural sort of farm-based farm consultant. The other one was a forestry expert. So along the journey, we also really got to learn about forestry, how the ETS works with forestry, because that's something that most of us didn't have that much knowledge about. So that was really great. And we also used Dr. Clint Risman from Land and Water Science to look at some of the carbon levels in the soil and things as well. So we were really calling on the experts to help us on our journey.
And then just to wrap up the project, we had a final field day, which was in late July, just a couple of 3 months ago. And that basically involved a couple of visits to a couple of the farms, project farms, and then a discussion about the results. But I think probably one of the things I'd say about it was that the success of the project really was that we tried to stay positive and forward-looking. So we didn't get involved in any of the politics. There's a lot of politics involved in agricultural emissions, as some of you will know. So we tried to stay right out of that. And so we were really looking for what's the business opportunity as farmers. We know this is coming at us and we need to accept it and look to how we're going to manage it. I think, as I mentioned, the buddy groups was a really important part of our project, made a lot to the success of it. We had really good support from Thriving Southland, especially around the communications. They ran all the Facebook page and email list and newsletters and media comments, media commentary. And because of that, actually, we did get a lot of interest and connection on a bit wider basis than just Dipton. and to the extent that we finished up with two interviews on RNZ National, one on the farming program and one on Jesse Mulligan's show about our project, and one on the local farming program based in Gore. We also, Meridian Energy spent quite a bit of time talking with us about our project because they own quite a number of farms where their wind electricity production is done. So they've got some ambitious goals around emissions reduction. So yeah, it was it's pretty gratifying to have this level of interest.
And alongside that, we were also lucky enough to be nominated for an Environment Southland Award and a Beef and Lamb Award, which the awards were just last week. Unfortunately, we didn't win anything, but it was really cool to have the project recognised and to be able to celebrate as a team for the work that had been put into the project. So if anyone wants to find out more, if you go to the Thriving Southland website, the link to all the project reports are on there if you follow the link to Carbon Neutral Dipton, or you can follow the Facebook page. But thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you today.
Thank you.
Questions. I'll give it to you. They've got mics on.
Yep. Okay, cool. Well, fantastic. Great conversations. We're about to have a great conversation, I think. So we've got some questions, and keep firing them from the audience, if you will, please, so that we can have a nice panel. So I've got a question around the jet boats first up. So we'll head over to my right. So will the jet boats also provide a quieter ride? Yeah, I guess that's the first part of the question.
Yeah, that's a really good question, actually. So the answer is yes, they are a lot quieter, actually, and it was there's sort of two ways to look at it. There's a bit of concern around the lack of the V8 noise affecting the product, because you get a lot of people really like V8s. But when we tested the prototype, there's still the water jet units, which are the same as in a petrol boat, still produce quite a powerful sound of pumping in the water. Like there's 800 litres of water a second coming out the back, so it's a really powerful sound. But overall, it is quieter, but it's great because it actually allows you to appreciate the environment that we operate in even more without the sort of big droning V8s.
And then a second part to that question for you is, do you see the work that you've been doing in the research and development phase having potential wider manufacturing opportunity to capitalise on that work?
Yes, I think so. So the work we're doing, we're sort of probably the first group to do this work, and we want to be first to launch the product, but we are committed to share the knowledge with the jet boat industry in New Zealand, or I guess the whole world actually, but there will be other applications that this applies to, but what they might be, I mean, it's yet to sort of be discovered, I think.
Nice, yeah, it's fantastic, fantastic work. I've got a question about why that we probably could share, Ben, but I'm going to throw it to you first. So does Y exchange data with Southern Lake Sanctuary to gather information about flora and fauna within the catchment?
So we do have a bunch of projects that we do collaborate with Southern Lake Sanctuary, but I'm not aware that we actually directly share data with each other. There's obviously a few different stakeholders and sharing of information that you have to be quite careful about, so yeah.
Great, thanks. We have a really nice question, a really great presentation from Dipton, so thanks for sharing and coming along. You're doing a really awesome project, and I think the collaboration part of your project was really quite nice to see. And in fact, I loved the collaboration part of your presentation as well. The question is, do you see opportunities to increase your revenue by linking the climate and biodiversity initiatives together to products that you might put to market?
Is that working? There's a big demand from consumers. There's obviously a lot of our product goes overseas, so there's a huge demand from consumers all over the world for these things to be recognised, and that's what we're aware of, and that's why we're trying to make changes on farm, because it's really, if we don't have an end market, then we don't have a role to play, basically. So yeah, I think there's a huge potential for that, and hope. There's already some recognition for some of the stuff we're doing in some of the payments through milk payments and meat companies, and I think that will only grow as we go forward.
Probably just to add to that, like the two recently negotiated free trade agreements, both have obligations for New Zealand to meet their climate change targets, for us to maintain those agreements. So obviously they're significant to agriculture as well as to other parts of the economy.
So I guess you mentioned around it being quite a political, or emissions in the ag sector being quite a political discussion in New Zealand, but it sounds like it's also playing out in the supply chain, from what you're saying as well, beyond the politics of it.
Yeah, very much so, and as Lyndon alluded to with the free trade agreements, I think when the chief negotiator, we had him speak to us down in Southland, and something like 93 out of 100 of the things they're negotiating on are actually about environmental and climate issues. So it's a massive thing. Sorry, I've lost my train of thought now of where we're going with that. But yeah, so it will just continue to play out, and we, like Lyndon said, we try to keep the project away from politics, because the consumers are asking us to change anyway, so it actually is in our benefit to do that regardless of regulation, and hopefully we'll be ahead of regulation rather than behind.
Yeah, I think that'll be important for New Zealand ag going forward, yeah. Donald, Ngātahu iwi are really looking to act for the future. Are there any other projects you've got underway?
Yes.
Sounds like you can't talk about them.
No,
They're under
I
wraps.
can. I'm just not. I'm not a knowledge expert on those, but yes, there are. So I can speak a lot about what we're doing within tourism, looking at moving our businesses to fitting them all out with solar power, moving a lot of our light vehicles to electric, including an electric bus. But there's also a really big focus in the other business units of seafood, forestry, farming, and property. But I'm sort of don't have a great deal of knowledge about that.
That's great to hear. There's other actions going on though to look at across the whole portfolio. So that's cool.
I get a bit focused on the jet boats.
Yeah, of course. Who wouldn't? I was quite intrigued to hear about the amount of power they actually use. That was profound for me. Yeah, and that's one of the bigger challenges, and it's we've been asked a lot, why didn't we look at hydrogen, and we did, but I talked about the weight budget that we have for an empty jet boat needs to be about 2.5 tonne. The equipment we'd need to put in the jet boat just to use the hydrogen for propulsive energy was about 1.7 tonne, so that just ate up way too much of our budget. But some of the other operations like Dart River, where there is much bigger boats and a longer duration, hydrogen is definitely something we'll look at. Nice. There's a question for me, so I'll ask it and answer it. So, bear with me. So, Carly, is there an intention to make the methodology available to adjust to other areas, sectors, and to make it also scalable? So, a lot of our energy these last few months has been to document quite clearly and completely how we've scaled the data for the catchment. This will all be available in the interest of transparency about how things are calculated, so anyone could apply it across different catchments. And that's really the intention of what we were trying to demonstrate, is that you can take this in some cases national level data and make it valuable and useful at an individual catchment level. So yeah, the answer is yes. And then hopefully we can grow it across other indicators and encourage collaboration, like say with Southern Lake Sanctuary and others, to collect locally specific data and make it an ongoing catchment level monitoring system. So yep, hopefully that answers the question. I have another. It seems like jet boats are really, really popular, Donald. Is there any monitoring or surveying to track ecological impacts of changing to electric jet boats?
Yeah, so we're just going through some water sampling right now to try and get a baseline of what impact on water quality we might be having with the internal combustion engine jet boats now. And then we'll continue that. It's sort of a new thing we're introducing, but we'll continue that as we transition to electric. And I guess there's a wee bit of I'm not sure if this is part of the question, but there's a wee bit of a thought process around what do we do with the batteries when we're finished with them. So there's and a lot of you guys will know, batteries or cells are measured in a state of health. And once the batteries in the electric jet boats drop to around 85 or 80%, they won't be suitable for use in the jet boats any longer. So part of the design, they'll be removable, but they'll still be perfectly suitable for application into storage of energy on, for example, the Shotover Jet site, or in some of the Ngāi Marae. So there's a really tight focus on what we do with those cells once the jet boats are finished with them.
Thanks. I've got a couple here, a joint one really for Y and Carbon Zero Dipton. So are both Y, Wanaka and Carbon Zero Dipton engaging with Mana Whenua to align with their shared values, interests and mahi?
Short answer, we are keeping the door open. It's a challenge within this region, particularly with 7 different runanga having ties to this region. So it's something that we do focus on and are really driven to have that collaboration, but we also recognise that these sorts of relationships take time, and so we're being honourable of that as well.
And probably a similar situation with us. We did approach Te Mamara and talk to them about the project, had a meeting with them. They are very stretched because there's not enough people and so many projects and so much demand on their time that they didn't have time to actually contribute in person, but they have followed the journey and we have kept them in the loop with our comms and stuff. And there are other projects through Thriving Southland that they are working with some of the runanga. There's a pest project going on with the Hokanui runanga and they're working closely with that. So I think it depends a little bit on the topic and the people that they have available for us down in Southland. Yeah.
So staying with your project in Dipton, you mentioned you had a focus on methane. So could you give us an idea about what percentage of emission reductions are you targeting? And then the second part of the question is around, you were talking about revegetation, and was there a focus on natives versus exotics, or what did that look like in your investigations or project?
Sorry.
Sorry, just tell me the first question again.
So, like your methane, what percentage?
Oh, the targets, yeah. No, we didn't target any specific reductions because The targets are still a bit, they're not fixed. If you followed the media about it, I suppose, there's still a bit of debate about exactly what levels of reduction are required. And plus, we just felt that that would open us up into the political part of the argument, which we wanted to stay clear of, because so often the political stuff can get negative and destructive, and we just didn't want to do that. Do you want to comment about the regeneration?
Yeah, so we had a forestry consultant on board as well, so some of the mitigations that were modelled were around forestry options, so some of that was radiata, some Douglas fir and some natives as well, and they were sort of costed in at those. And we did very much try and look at the mitigations not siloed in terms of greenhouse gases, but thinking about biodiversity and water quality alongside those things. So probably very much a case of right tree, right place, and depending on the location, what was going to be suitable, and also, you know, how that impacted in terms of the financials, because, you know, at the end of the day, we're running businesses, and the things do have to add up from a financial perspective as well.
So another question for Dipton, very popular. You showed some really great slides around your community engagement. It was really a big part of your project, by the sounds of it, and the wellness and the discussions, and I guess and how that all played out. Have you seen an improvement in wellbeing in Dipton as a result of your project?
I suppose we haven't measured that as such. I think we're very lucky. Dipton is a great community. We're also lucky in our catchment group that we just have one central sort of hub. We don't have multiple townships that we're trying to encompass, so there's a very close-knit community there. There's a social club, there's a lot goes on in Dipton, so hard to measure that as such, I suppose, without, we haven't done your stats like you guys have, so...
More smiles, though?
Yeah, and I think we're getting more interaction, and depending on the topic, you get different people coming and things like that, so... and we have also had some negative commentary over our project on the Facebook page, which, you know, we expected, so... but we just tried to bring as many people on the journey with us as we could, I think.
No, it's a good. I mean, I guess you're having lots of discussions, and opening the door to positive and negative discussions is a good thing anyway, to have those out. Question for you around the shot over jet again. For the amount of power you'll need, is solar something that will be considered too, or as well?
In the early days, solar won't contribute a great deal to the jet boats, because the amount of solar energy we can harness off the site, it will contribute, but not a great deal. But as we build the energy storage ability on site, from taking, you know, batteries that we take out of the boats, then we'll be able to start storing it from solar and charging the boats from that.
Sorry, I'm just reordering my things. I guess a general question to the panel, so we can start, whoever wants to go first. What was your why for taking action, and what advice would you give others wanting to act? Who wants to take that one first?
I think we, funnily enough, our project, our group started in 2019, wasn't it? And the idea of that project was actually mooted around that time, but nobody was brave enough, and we were probably a bit looking more at the water quality issue, because that was the rules and regulations that were coming at us at the time. But we felt, I think within our core group, we felt that climate change was probably going to be the bigger challenge to farming in the long run, and was really something that we needed to get our heads around. And so that was probably the why, I think. And plus, along with that, was we were looking at, well, what's the opportunities in it?
I guess our why comes back to the values of no tahu, and it's a very multi-generational approach. We can make this change. We've got the ability to thinking about the jet boats only, we've got the ability to make this change that will have a really massive positive effect for the future and generations after us, and that's been our driver.
Yeah, I think at Waiwanaka, we're a small group of individuals, and at the end of the day, we all care about the region that we live in, and a response to a lot of the work that we do, or the work that we do was a response to some of the environmental challenges that we have witnessed. A lot of the team have grown up in the region, and so have witnessed a significant change in a lot of the natural beauty that we have. And a bit of advice, I guess, is to just start talking. People are off and are doing their own thing, but no one's really sure of who's doing what, so everyone can just talk and make sure that everyone knows that you're all doing good work.
Maybe if we could just stay with you, Ben, for a little longer. Has any of the work going on in the catchment through WISE work identified any new areas of special scientific interest that you're aware of?
One of the projects that we do at the moment that I'm leading, there's a species of freshwater fish that's as endangered as the kakapo, and it only lives up in the upper Clutha, and so it's been pushed up that way primarily because of predator pressure from trout and salmon. And so this fish is it's a Clutha flathead galaxid, so it's a species of galaxid are migratory or unmigratory or non-migratory. The migratory galaxids are like your whitebait, so they go from ocean to freshwater, but these ones don't leave. And so they've been pushed up into tiny, tiny little tributaries up the upper Clutha. And so, yeah, as I say, they're an incredibly genetically diverse and unique species with genetics, different genetics from different elevations, even within similar catchments. So they're an incredibly unique species. Through the use of environmental DNA testing, we have the ability to actually look at some of these values and actually look at such an incredible piece of technology. You take a water sample and it'll tell you what organism has touched that water within a 2-kilometre radius. It's insane. Yeah.
There's kind of a link question here, and I'll ask it, but we'll see how we go. So for Waiwanaka, how do you reconcile Fish and Game's protection advocacy for introduced species in the Upper Clutha catchment specifically?
Yeah, that's a curly one, isn't it?
It is curly.
Yeah.
It's okay if you can't answer.
That's all right. Hey, look, at the end of the day, the fish didn't choose to be here. We've brought them here, and so we just need to manage. We need to manage expectations and priorities. At the end of the day, there are more than just Fish and Game that actually seek value in these species as well, through recreational fishing and things like that. So, we just got to be proactive and actually look at steps forward and how we can live with these rather than pointing the finger and blaming.
Thanks, Ben. Any other comments anyone wants to make around your particular projects? I mean, particularly in Dipton, you guys are really tackling some challenging issues in terms of basically the emissions on your farm, and then also communicating the importance of what the supply chain is asking you to do. I mean, you've presented an amazing project. Do you see that this has opportunity in other farming communities to have a similar, discussions?
Yeah, hopefully the idea wasn't why we sort of chose cross-sector sheep and beef and dairy was that everyone can find something maybe similar in their business that they could take from this, or a learning that they could take. And hence we modelled lots of different mitigations as well, some more extreme than others. in essence, we didn't find the answer. We haven't found the silver bullet, but we found lots of wee small tweaks that could make a difference on farm and that are hopefully applicable elsewhere. And we'd like to see the journey continue. We haven't decided what's next, but we hope to sort of develop and extend this project in some way going forward that, you know, hopefully people will follow that part of it, yeah. And if anyone has any great ideas about what we could do with that, please let us know, because we're just probably at a bit of a, just having a rest period while we work out what's next. But we'd like to continue to do something and develop it further if we can.
A well-earned rest by the sounds of it. I think we've come to the end of the comments from the audience, unless anyone's got any last-minute burning questions. I'd like you to join with me to thank the panellists for their amazing work and also their excellent presentations. So thanks for joining us this evening. Please don't go anywhere. There's food and drinks and fantastic event to follow, so stay in your hot seats.